Now I appreciate that January, being the cold, expensive month that comes right after the festive period, is always a bloodbath for theatre, both in the UK and in the US. But is it me, or does it feel like even more shows are closing than usual? And closing early. Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe, and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am a critic, pundit, and content creator here on YouTube, and this is my theatre-themed YouTube channel, where I review the shows that I get to go and see, and I also talk about the theatre industry, both in the West End and on Broadway. And right now we find ourselves in the depths of January, which is not traditionally a big month for theatre openings, but it is often when you will see a lot of shows close. Many of the reasons for which are pretty straightforward. Like I said, it comes right after Christmas, so if shows are planning to close, they will last out that last little festive period, so they can get a lot of great ticket sales over the Christmas weeks. People aren't at work, they're heading to New York, Christmas in New York, Christmas in London. You get the people doing their shopping, they'll go and see a show afterwards. They do great business. They're not going to do great business in January. Everyone goes back to work, back to school. No one wants to spend money because they just spent it all at Christmas. And for some of the shows that have closed this month, it's that simple. For others, however, there's a little more to it. Now, one of the most conspicuous recent closing announcements was for last year's Tony Award-winning new musical, Kimberly Akimbo. That, along with Broadway shows like Shucked and Some Like It Hot, all closing surprisingly quickly after that Tony Awards season. Meanwhile, in the West End, as well as the conclusion of limited runs of shows like Dear England and Sunset Boulevard and Stephen Sondheim's Old Friends, there has also been the unexpected early closures of shows like Crazy for You, Unbelievable, and the most recently announced, albeit very quietly, The Time Traveler's Wife. So in today's new video, we're going to be talking about why each of these shows is closing early and what this means for the theatre industry on both sides of the Atlantic. If you enjoy this one, and if you want more theatre reviews, more theatre punditry, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel, and you can go and find other theatre opinions and content from me on other social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, X, that is Twitter. And of course, I am very intrigued to hear what you all think about these shows as well. If there's another show that's closed or closed early, let us know in the comments down below. And if you have any other insights about the shows I'm talking about in today's video, or you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, let us know in the comments as well. For now, let's talk about why it feels like so many shows are closing. So I want to start with Kimberly Akimbo because this is kind of the most recent bombshell announcement. I say bombshell, looking at the Broadway grosses, which are made public so you can see how much money a show is making each week. I don't know that this came as a huge surprise, and ultimately I do think the show just did well to outlast the other shows that it opened alongside, like Shucked and like Some Like It Hot. So let me tell you a few more details here. On January 5th, the producers announced that Kimberly Akimbo, winner of 5 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, would play its final Broadway performance on Sunday, April 28th. Meaning, obviously, if you haven't seen it yet, you still have a little longer. Head to the Booth Theatre, go and see Kimberly Akimbo. There is nothing else like it on Broadway right now. Upon closing, Kimberly Akimbo will have played 32 previews and 612 performances on Broadway. It will then kick off a 75-week, 60-city national tour at the Denver Center for Performing Arts. And I'm very intrigued to see who is in the touring cast. One of the saddest things when a show closes relatively early on in its lifetime is we don't get to see a replacement cast, because there are so many exciting performers who could have gone into this show as Kimberly or her parents or Aunt Deborah, or even like amazing young talents going into those younger roles. It's really sad we're not going to have that opportunity on Broadway, but the national tour is calling. Now, I do think Kimberly Akimbo, all things considered, managed to run for an impressively long time, considering the fact there are no big starry names in this cast. There are beloved Broadway performers like Victoria Clark, like Bonnie Milligan, who both won Tonys for this show, like Ali Morsey, but these sadly are not names that will mean anything to tourists, not like Hugh Jackman in The Music Man or Josh Groban in Sweeney Todd. It's not on that same level. Lea Michele in Funny Girl, it's not one of those. Then you have the source material itself. This is based on a play. Again, that's going to mean more to the theatre community than it is to tourists. It's not based on a movie. I actually think, and I know not everything needs to be a movie musical, but given the right director, I think Kimberly Akimbo could make a pretty decent movie musical, because it feels like an indie movie of a show already. Is it too stereotypical to suggest that Meryl Streep and Andrew Barth Feldman could play Kimberly and Seth? Because that just feels obvious to me. But no, part of the reason why Kimberly Akimbo has done as well as it has is the Best Musical Tony Award win. That means more on Broadway and to New York audiences than the equivalent Olivier Award for the Best New Musical means in London, for the same reason that reviews mean more in New York than they do in London. Let me tell you why. The reason, quite simply, I believe, is ticket prices. Broadway tickets are in general more expensive than theatre tickets in London, so tourists who are going to New York specifically to see theatre want to see the best show. What's the great show on Broadway? Even theatre people I know in the UK always ask for show recommendations. They're like, what's the good thing to see on Broadway? Something like a Best Musical Tony Award win gives that stamp of approval and says to audiences and tourists and potential theatregoers, this is the one you want to go and see. Now, during that brief period where, because of the writer's strike, it looked like the Tony Awards might not be going ahead on their planned date, it was looking very dicey for Kimberly Akimbo, and there was some discussion that the show might not actually be able to stay open without the Tony Award for Best Musical. People kind of knew that it was going to be them. There was some speculation that Shucked or Some Like It Hot might take it, but certainly the Tony Awards happening when they did, and giving it to Kimberly Akimbo did manage to keep the show open for longer. Ultimately, however, the show's capacity has dwindled, and it's not the easiest show to recast with stunt names, nor is that really in keeping with the feel of the production. I think that would feel tackier than most if they were to try and find some star name to foist into the show somewhere, unless it felt dramatically cohesive. And so Kimberly Akimbo will close. Hopefully, as well as that national tour life, that might mean we get to see a production in the West End. I don't know if it will be like the production, like a straight transfer, or a new version of the show. I'm very intrigued. Janine Tesori hinted that that might be on the cards in an interview she did last year, somewhere like the Hampstead Theatre, where she's worked before with Caroline or Change. I would love that. Please bring it to London. Next up, since I've mentioned it already, let's talk about Shucked. Now, my corn on the cob shaped heart is breaking for this one because I fell in love with Shucked when I saw it in March of last year, and sadly they actually announced their closing while I was in New York in October. I know this because a friend told me while they were at the Glass House Tavern, Alex Newell, Tony winner Alex Newell, and the cast of Shucked all walked in singing Times is Hard from Sweeney Todd. And much like Kimberly Akimbo, this doesn't have huge starry names in its cast. It also isn't based on anything well known, and ticket sales had slowed down that little bit. However, there is another factor in the closing of this show that's a little bit different. So here is the press release. Broadway's homegrown musical comedy to harvest its crop at the Nederlander Theatre on Sunday, January 14th. Which is today. As I'm sitting here filming this video, for you it'll be a few days ago. I'm very sad about it. Today, producers announced that Shucked will depart the Nederlander Theatre on Sunday, January 14th, 2024. But it's not goodbye, it's to be continued. Gah, Shucked, even in death. With, among other engagements, the North American Colonels Tour, as in K-E-R, not like the KFC guy, launching fall 2024, and forthcoming international grain exports to London's West End at a Cameron Mackintosh Theatre, that's in bold, winter of 2025. We'll come back to that, I know your heads may be spinning. And Sydney, Australia in spring of 2026 with producing partner Suzanne Jones. On January 14th, Shucked will have played 28 preview performances, 327 corn kick lines, regular performances, 24,601 standing ovations. That's not a real number, that's from Les Mis. Okay, all of the rest of these are jokes. That's fine. I love you, Shucked. I love your energy, but we're here to talk about the facts. So you'll notice that's almost half the performances that Kimberly Akimbo had, and you start to see where something like a Tony Award for Best Musical can prolong a show's life. The Booth, to my knowledge, is also a smaller theatre than the Nederlander, and perhaps a less desirable one, because the other factor here is that another show wanted the Nederlander. That show is The Who's Tommy, which is coming in this spring and wasting no time. Privately, I have been told that Shucked could continue to run in New York if it were to find a new home. There's been some discussion about whether or not Shucked could go off-Broadway like other shows have before. The Play That Goes Wrong and Rock of Ages, I believe, went off-Broadway, Avenue Q, Jersey Boys. But much like Beetlejuice was closed at the Winter Garden so that the Music Man could come in and replace them, sometimes sometimes this is at the discretion of the theatre owners who would rather a show come in that can do better business, and evidently they have faith in The Who's Tommy getting that nostalgia money. Now, I said I would go back to this because, London people, you may have been surprised to hear in that press release that the West End production of Shucked has been delayed to winter of 2025. Winter can mean multiple things because it's winter right now, but I think if you're saying winter 2025, that means the end of the year. That's like November, December, October time, rather than January winter, which is sad news because previously it had been suggested Shucked was going to come in 2024. Worth pointing out, this has not been widely reported. This is just a little line in the American press release. This did not go to British theatre outlets. I've known about this for a little while, but I didn't want to be the bearer of bad news. I have mentioned it, but sadly it could be a little while before we see Shucked, and that worries me because things can go wrong in those sorts of extended time periods. In another article, it says Shucked is closing despite running at 85% capacity and grossing around $750,000 a week. Kind of unbelievable that that is not enough, and a newer, younger, hotter show can come in and oust them. I hope I enjoy The Who's Tommy, because otherwise I'm going to be very upset about this. Now let's look even further back with the first of last season's new musicals to announce its closing, other than the likes of Bad Cinderella, with Some Like It Hot. So at the end of September, it was announced that Some Like It Hot would play its final Broadway performance at the Schubert Theatre on December 30th, 2023. Literally getting that festive period and then closing before they even touched January. At the time of the final performance, the production will have played the Schubert Theatre for over a year for a total of 483 performances. A national tour will launch in September 2024, and a West End production will follow in 2025, which I actually think will do very well. I think it could do better than Broadway. When my fiancée Erin and I went to New York, we saw Some Like It Hot, and we said to each other, this is a show that will do well in the West End. But it also didn't really get the Tony Awards that it needed. It won for its choreography and for its star J. Harrison G, who gave a wonderful, heartfelt performance. It also had the benefit of a little bit more name recognition because it's based on an old Marilyn Monroe film. But I don't know to what extent the current culture war in the US around the idea of drag and this trans panic alienated audiences from a show, the central plot point of which is men dressing in drag in order to escape the mob and the tap dancing chaos that follows. Is that going to be a problem on its national tour? We have these states that are trying to pass bans on drag. Is Some Like It Hot even going to be able to perform there? Worth noting, I've heard people remark that one of the reasons Some Like It Hot is closing is because the Broadway community didn't wholeheartedly embrace it at the beginning, because there was division about whether or not this was good trans and non-binary representation, or whether it was the latest in a string of shows that utilize the man in a dress trope in order to get laughs, the previous shows being Tootsie and Doubtfire. I, for what it's worth, think there is much more sensitivity in this material. I'm not trans or non-binary, so I'm not going to speak for an entire community, but I think J. Harrison G's authentic, meaningful performance in this show goes a long way. I think the material has been written with significantly more consideration and care. And I also think that what can look like a really big storm on social media to people in the immediate theatre community isn't nearly as big as you think it might be. And that theatre Twitter's willingness to go and see a Broadway show isn't going to be the thing that keeps it open or closes it. That being said, it is still also a factor, so should be acknowledged in this conversation. Finally, here's another one which is closing early off-Broadway and tried to fly under the radar a little bit. I am talking about the Mind Mangler. Now, this is a spin-off of a show from Mischief Theatre, who brought you The Play That Goes Wrong and Peter Pan Goes Wrong. Another of their shows, Magic Goes Wrong, has yet to make it to New York, but the Mind Mangler character came from that show. And so the play Mind Mangler, A Night of Tragic Illusion was born. Now, this is currently playing at New York's New World Stages, where The Play That Goes Wrong is also playing, and it opened on November 19th, was originally scheduled to run through March 3rd, and is closing over a month early on January 28th. This was announced on December 22nd, suspiciously close to Christmas, when not many outlets are going to be at work to pick it up and cover it, and the news can kind of fly under the radar. From what I understand, there is now plans to mount the show again in the UK, where every time it's had a little tour or a limited engagement, it's been very popular because we love the Mischief Theatre guys over here. Not that they don't in New York, but I think what we can learn from this is that The Play That Goes Wrong has a really great marketable title. Audiences know what that is. From the marketing, you can see that it is a farce, that it's this kind of old school murder mystery spoof kind of setup, and that it's going to be a comedy. You know what to expect. The Mind Mangler thing, I don't know if they quite got the goes wrong aspect of it. And even Peter Pan Goes Wrong struggled on Broadway, which is why they had to bring in a series of successive star names like Neil Patrick Harris. Perhaps even though Mischief have managed to dominate the UK with multiple shows open at one time, New York is only really capable of maintaining one Mischief Theatre show. Over to the West End now, and I want to talk about the recently closed production of Crazy for You. It is no secret that I loved this show. I went to see it on my birthday, which is a high privilege that I reserve for what I think is the best show in town. Sadly, it did not really catch with audiences, and throughout the run, we did not see this selling as many tickets as it ought to have done. Classic musicals are something that have struggled post-pandemic. I'm not sure if more of the demographic of these types of shows might be the older people who are more reluctant to head into London on public transport amidst a lot of illness. Maybe people who are going out less. Habits have changed since the pandemic. In any case, something like My Fair Lady at the London Coliseum seems to struggle for the same reason, but then when it went out on tour, discernibly it seemed to do better business. It met those people in their local communities where they already were. I'm cautiously concerned for The King and I, which is about to open at the huge Dominion Theatre for the same reason. But Crazy for You did not close massively early. It was scheduled to run through the 20th of January 2024. The closing date was brought forwards by 3 weeks to the 31st of December. Again, getting that Christmas money, not touching January with a barge pole. And this was announced on the 11th of November. Generally, when we see shows closing early in the UK, it's not dramatically early and it's not dramatically far in advance. This because the weekly operating costs of the shows here are less than they are on Broadway. Every week that a struggling show stays open in New York, they are losing more money than they would here in the UK, so they close earlier. The Gillian Lynn is also, I think, a slightly more challenging theatre to sell. We've seen this with some of its previous tenants. But in any case, RIP Crazy for You, I loved you. What I will say is it is hard to find press coverage of these early closings because they've seemed to want to not be talked about, which is not surprising. Producers don't want these big announcements that their shows are struggling and closing early. Perhaps they're worried that that will put off the last remaining audiences who they hope to court. I don't know if audiences will avoid seeing a show because it's closing early, or if you will gain more theatre fans who want to go and see something because otherwise they won't have the opportunity. But I have heard of arts editors actually being asked not to publish about shows' early closing announcements, which is kind of staggering, I think. Here's another one that quietly closed a lot earlier than it had initially planned to. This was Unbelievable in the West End. Initially called Derren Brown's Unbelievable because he helped to devise the show despite not appearing in it, they took his name off of it, not because he wasn't proud of the thing that he'd made, but presumably because audiences were expecting him to actually be on stage. They thought it was the latest Derren Brown show. He's done many in the West End, but he is not in this one. So Unbelievable played its final performance on Sunday, the 7th of January 2024. This was a big early closing because it was initially booking to the 7th of April, and it wasn't a limited run. This was a booking period that could have been extended. I think the hope here was that they were going to find a way to create a popular Derren Brown show that could run without him in it. This, unfortunately, didn't catch with audiences, and I don't think it's just because he wasn't in the show. They had a very talented cast, but it didn't really offer the same punch and thrill that a Derren Brown show does. I think some of the devising of this show just felt a little bit threadbare and a little bit padded, but certainly his absence was also a factor for audiences. In any case, that's an early closure of, 3 months? and it has meant some unexpected new tenants at the Criterion Theatre. The revival of The Merchant of Venice is about to open there, and then after that we're going to have a West End transfer of the musical Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York, which I saw at the Kiln and was great. So that is exciting news for those other shows that can now gain a last-minute West End home. Sad news for the company and creatives of Unbelievable. Another one which was very quiet about its early closing. But not as quiet as this next one. In fact, have they actually acknowledged in a social media post that they are closing yet? Possibly not. I literally don't think they have. Like, they've replied to tweets to clarify that the show is going to be closing, but they haven't actually announced it, which is madly bizarre. In any case, The Time Traveller's Wife, currently playing at the Apollo Theatre in the West End, is sadly going to be closing early. They are closing on, I think, the 24th of February. I've lost it now, and they haven't confirmed it. Now again, this was just a booking period. This wasn't a limited run. This could have extended. And because, as far as we know, there was nothing that was scheduled to come in after The Time Traveller's Wife, this early closing may also make way for some last-minute West End transfers. Shows that thought they didn't have a theatre for a few years may now be able to come in early. Shows that weren't going to transfer to the West End at all may now have that opportunity. Many exciting shows have come to the West End previously because of last-minute transfer opportunities. That, of course, is not a consolation for the hard-working cast, crew, and creative of The Time Traveller's Wife. Needless to say, for this show, which is closing early but is currently still open, if you haven't seen it yet, please, please, please go and see it in the West End. If nothing else, this cast absolutely deserves the support. This show opened on the 7th of October, so closing in 24th of February. How many performances is that? I mean, it's like November, December, January, February. It's just over 4 months, I guess. We're not very good in the UK at sharing the number of performances when shows close. The other thing we're not very good at is publishing a show's weekly grosses, so we don't know how well things are selling or how much money they are making. But a glance at ticket booking sites indicated that The Time Traveller's Wife wasn't selling as well as they were presumably hoping to. I know friends went to go and see it and got upgraded from the top level of the theatre down to the stalls. That's also not a great sign for a show's success. And I'm wondering exactly why that is, because, you know, it doesn't have crossover household name stars in the cast. It has theatre names like David Hunter, but he's probably the biggest name attached to the production. It also has some name recognition in the show itself. The Time Traveller's Wife, you know, that's been a popular book, and there have been different screen adaptations of it. And you'd have thought that that would have boosted sales a little bit, that people would have gone. It would have been this date night show. I think a factor here is that the critics didn't really love it, and there was no one critically championing this show. That hurt its chances. It wasn't open long enough to get any kind of awards traction, and in a very popular year for new musicals, I don't know if it would have got the awards that it needed to. The names that it was trying to sell in its press and marketing campaigns were the writers, Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics and Joss Stone, but it's really hard to sell a show on a famous writer. Much like with Derren Brown's involvement in Unbelievable, people aren't actually getting to see them on stage. If you're a huge fan, you'll go and see their work, and they can do those press appearances. You can get Joss Stone on the TV promoting the show. She sang one of its songs on something or other, but that is an opportunity that you have as a publicist to promote the show that way. However, it's a harder sell than having a star in it like a Nicole Scherzinger who can go on TV and say, come see me in this show. You get it? Oh my god, hey, it's Mickey Joe from the future. I am in the process of editing the video you're watching literally right now, and in the 3 days between filming this and editing it, there are already changes. So earlier in the video, I talked about the Mind Mangler, the show from Mischief, closing off Broadway and then trying to kind of pivot to a West End run instead. I also just mentioned that there was going to be a vacancy at the Apollo Theatre. It would be interesting to see what went in there after The Time Traveller's Wife. Well, put your hands together, because we now have an answer. The Mind Mangler, having closed early off Broadway, is going to go and do a limited run at the Apollo Theatre, where The Time Traveller's Wife has closed early in the West End. I can get you the full details. It's running for just over a month, I think, or somewhere around a month. So this is not like the next long-running show at the Apollo. This is just filling a little gap before something else is going to come in, and it won't be too long before we find out what that show is, because they're going to need to start selling tickets in advance. My money's on a play, simply because there are many waiting in the wings for a West End home. Yep, so this is going to be at the Apollo Theatre from the 14th of March to the 28th of April. Support the show in the West End if you like mischief, if you like the Goes Wrong show, if you have someone in your life who likes comedy but isn't that interested in theatre and you want a show that they will go and see with you, book tickets to go see the Mind Mangler. Now, back to the rest of the video. In the meantime, I am manifesting that this is a successful year for theatre, full of financial prosperity. Please, 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 as potential audience members watching these videos, I know as people watching theatre videos on YouTube that you do go and see theatre, you do go and support as much theatre as you can. Encourage your friends, your relatives, buy people theatre tickets as gifts, theatre tokens and vouchers so they can book to see the shows they want to go and see. Whatever you can do to help support the theatre industry. We are still in this post-pandemic struggle period, and I am worried about several shows coming to Broadway right now because I don't think that this season of new musicals, many new shows coming in, but with competition that has a lot more name recognition, like The Wiz and like Tommy and like Cabaret, I worry about the new musicals that don't have huge stars attached to them either. Time will tell, and as new theatre news breaks, you know that you will hear it on here. Oh my god, hey, me again. So it turns out watching this space, or whatever it is that I just said, actually means barely being able to count to 10 before the next Broadway show announces it's going to close earlier than planned. And sadly, this is a show from this season that opened only a couple of months ago and is going to close before the Tony Awards. I am talking about Harmony. So this just got announced, this news came out last night. It's currently running at the Barrymore Theatre, and it's one of a few shows which is struggling to find an audience. This opened since I was last in New York, and I've heard bits about it from friends. I heard some people really liked it. It did not get reviews that kind of set the box office on fire, but it was generally positively received, if a little bit lukewarm. All of which did nothing to mitigate the fact that there's not a really huge star name. We had some incredible Broadway veterans in this cast. Chip Zien from the original cast of Into the Woods was in this, Sierra Boggess and Julie Benko, who just made a name for herself understudying in Funny Girl. But sadly, much like The Time Traveler's Wife, the real star name was the producer, the composer, Barry Manilow. Actually, I just said producer because I'm assuming that Manilow is also producing, but he definitely composed it. Ken Davenport is the lead producer in any case. But much like with The Time Traveler's Wife, producers may have hoped that Barry Manilow's fans would have bought tickets to go and see the show, but what those people really want is to go and see Barry Manilow. So it's tricky. Celebrity writers, celebrity producers, which is something else we're seeing more of recently. It's tricky. It doesn't do as much to promote ticket sales at the box office. It gives you an avenue through which to do press on television, but unfortunately, it can't always keep open a struggling show. I would love to hope and manifest that this is the last time we're going to see this happening before the Tony Awards, but I just don't think that's realistic. Stay tuned as this story continues to evolve. Make sure you're subscribed. Any more early shock closures, I will be talking about them here on my channel or other social media platforms. But again, I implore you, if you can go and support new theatre, struggling theatre, please, please do it. Oh my god, hey, it's me again! As a side mission in this video, you can look at how much longer my hair is getting in between each of these takes. I would love to give you some sense of timeline and continuity, but I can't even remember when I started trying to film this video. I just know that every time I plan for it to get released, more news drops, because sadly, 2 more shows have announced that they are going to close. One in the West End, one on Broadway. One is closing upsettingly early, one is closing after a successful 3 years. So there's a balance going on here, but we're going to talk about both of those now. Starting with the first to announce, which was How to Dance in Ohio. More sad news from the 2023-2024 Broadway season. This show, which has been playing at the Belasco Theatre, has been struggling to build an audience, and I'm going to read about the press release and I'm going to tell you more about this. But this one makes me particularly sad and a little bit angry because I know that getting to New York and seeing Broadway shows is financially alienating, but every time I see discourse about films being turned into musicals and about another revival, there is always this dialogue from theatre fans about what is it that we want to see. We want to see new musicals, we want original scores, we want stories from different communities and different perspectives that are cast authentically, and we want affordable ticketing. How to Dance in Ohio is doing all of those things. It has striven to do all of those things, and I will tell you more about why that didn't quite work for them. But I'm sad for this show that arrived on Broadway at the very end of 2023 with the noblest and the purest of intentions. I know this because I got invited to their press launch, which made me genuinely very excited about the show. So I'm very upset by this. That being said, the writing has also been on the wall for this show in terms of the weekly grosses, and I think they've done a very good job trying to keep it open as long as they have. So they've announced that the final performance will be February the 11th. If you are in New York or going to New York in between now and then, please consider going to see this show. It would be fantastic if they could have really enthusiastic and positive and full audiences between now and then. The new neurodivergent coming-of-age musical opened at the Belasco Theatre December 10th after beginning previews November 15th. At the time of closing, the musical will have played 27 previews and 72 regular performances. The production was a major milestone for neurodivergent representation on Broadway, with 7 openly autistic actors playing the show's 7 autistic characters, as echoed in the show's mantra, "Nothing about us without us." And the producers have shed a little bit of light on this as well, which I'll tell you about before I give you my 2 cents. They said, "Developing new work is always a risk, but producing this show was an endeavour we eagerly accepted. We're incredibly proud that this original, joyful and life-affirming musical has deeply moved countless audience members at the Belasco Theatre and beyond. Broadway has been changed forever because of How to Dance in Ohio and all the artists involved. We look forward to seeing its legacy continue in new and exciting ways." The talent in this show is the other thing. It's an exceptional cast of young talent, and we're great at celebrating those performers when they blow up and talking about the Renee Rapps of this world and the Andrew Barth Feldmans of this world, but I don't know if we do enough as a community to support the rise, or if we just let mainstream entertainment do that and then we claim them as Broadway stars once they've got really popular. And my whole thing is, obviously people want to go and see Merrily, and people want to go and see Sutton and Aaron in Sweeney Todd, and people want to go and see the shows that they already know that they love and the stars that they already know that they love. And yes, those are huge talents, those are great shows, but you have to support the new work, you have to support the rising stars, because that's where those performers originally came from, by and large. But off of my soapbox, How to Dance in Ohio was always going to be an uphill climb to Broadway that unfortunately struggled to build momentum. That's an allusion to one of the songs in the show. It's based on a documentary. You heard a little bit about the nature of the show and the themes that it deals with. I think there is a little bit of a similarity tonally, or without having seen the show, it feels as though there is to me to something like a Kimberly Akimbo, and I wonder if that had closed already, whether maybe some of those audience members would have then made it to How to Dance in Ohio instead. All of these shows are struggling from not having yet had the attention that the Tony Awards and potential nominations and potential wins might bring, but the reviews for How to Dance in Ohio also weren't spectacular enough to keep it open. This show, which did not have star names, which was not based on a well-known property and had no major incentive to get tourists to the box office, needed spectacular word of mouth, spectacular reviews to convince people that this was the thing they needed to go and see. Kimberly Akimbo, not a well-known title, but it had the Best Musical Tony win, like I already said in this video, and so that's what got people there. I think this show and Harmony have struggled for very similar reasons at very similar times, and marketing plays a part in this as well, and I don't think this is a fault of the marketing teams, but they are both difficult shows to market, and you can only work with what you have. And right now, marketing is reliant on selling potential ticket buyers that thing that they already know that they're going to love. I don't think ticket buyers are taking risks in the way that they used to. I don't know if they're seeking out the new exciting thing, or not in large enough numbers to sustain Broadway shows. Off-Broadway, perhaps. In any case, How to Dance in Ohio will, by my maths, become the 4th new musical to close prematurely prior to the Tony Award nominations even being announced, prior to the end of the season. We've lost Once Upon a One More Time, the Britney musical, Musical, Here Lies Love, Harmony, and now How to Dance in Ohio. And I'm wondering whether this trend will sadly continue and the 2023-2024 Broadway season may become the season that closed before it even started. Certainly times are looking bleak right now on Broadway. So here in the West End, meanwhile, we have a little bit of change, which is not wholly unexpected, nor is it quite as sad a story, because Frozen is going to close at Theatre Royal Drury Lane on September the 8th, the day after my birthday. They're closing in September because this is when the schools go back, and this is when their business is going to slow down, because this is a family show. People take their kids over the summer holidays. London gets very busy in the summer. Frozen is going to do really great business, even though it's a wintry show. They do their summer promotion and they're going to make a lot of money, and then they're going to close in September, almost exactly when the schools go back. Now, like I said, the show has run for 3 years at Theatre Royal Drury Lane. It has been a huge success there, but there is still an element of this which people have found shocking online, and people have been surprised by this news. I think because it's such a juggernaut and Disney is such a huge property and Frozen is so enduringly popular, people kind of expected it to run forever, not unlike The Lion King. The Lion King has a vast appeal all of its own because it's so visual and it's so well known, not that Frozen isn't, but the music is so well known, and I think international tourists, and this is what I've heard, can go to The Lion King without necessarily being able to follow all of it in English, without having to follow all of it in English, because you can still appreciate the visual elements and the music. It's not as much of an issue. There's not as much of a language barrier seeing The Lion King. I've gone to multiple countries in the last year where The Lion King was playing and considered seeing The Lion King because I had no concerns about being able to follow it. I was actually quite intrigued to. I don't know if Frozen has that same thing, and it doesn't yet have the intergenerational appeal, like you have the adults who grew up with The Lion King taking their kids to see The Lion King. It also has a broader cultural appeal. And a big factor in all of this is that Frozen was in an intimidatingly large theatre. Theatre Royal Drury Lane has a capacity of over 2,000 seats, close to about 2,200. And people had been speculating for about the last year or so that it might be beginning to slow down because ticket sales were beginning to get just a little bit quieter. Now, in terms of its future and Disney's future in the UK, Disney Theatrical are doing some very interesting things right now, which is probably fodder for a completely different video. I would anticipate that Frozen will tour. Aladdin is touring right now. I don't think Frozen will go out on tour until after that is done. They could absolutely sell and run simultaneously, but there's no need for Disney to rush Frozen out on the road. I would expect that to be something that would happen. But then there are multiple follow-up questions, including, is there going to be another Disney musical in the UK? Because both in the West End and on Broadway, 2 Disney musicals at any given time has become the norm for historic reasons in New York, and just because that's what we tend to see in London, though we have had more simultaneously in London. A couple summers ago, I think there were 4. A lot of people are wondering, are we going to get a UK production of Hercules? Well, Hercules happened at Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey after a different premiere production in New York. They are now developing it further with Casey Nicholaw as the new director over in Germany. Whether that production then changes and it comes over to the UK, watch this space, I guess. I don't think any of that is going to happen very fast. There are also rumours of Aida coming to the West End at some point in 2024. Aida being a Disney stage musical not based on one of their films, but it does have English creatives, Sir Elton John and Sir Tim Rice. So it would make sense that any major revival would have a significant UK presence. But the other question is, what is next for Theatre Royal Drury Lane? Like I said, an intimidatingly huge venue, comparable to the likes of the London Palladium, which has not had an open-ended run for some time now. The London Palladium has this new model where they have the pantomime over Christmas, they have a lot of one-night gigs and things, and then they will do usually a musical over the summer. That's Hello Dolly this year. But Drury Lane, from what I understand, is going to continue to try and sustain longer runs, though we won't necessarily see another open-ended run going in next. There are many different rumours swirling and spiralling around. Is My Neighbour Totoro from the Barbican looking for a permanent home? That show sells very well. Both times it's had a limited run at the Barbican, it has sold hugely well. It's been very, very popular, and it's a very big production physically, it would need a very big space, which they could have at Theatre Royal Drury Lane. There has been speculation for the longest time about Oliver returning to the West End. This is going to be in a Cameron Mackintosh house, so not Theatre Royal Drury Lane, even though the last revival was at Drury Lane. Maybe for nostalgia it would go back there, but I would anticipate Oliver going to one of Cameron's theatres and not Drury Lane, which is a LW theatre, Lloyd Webber. And I'm also hearing different things. I've seen talk of the producers and of other completely new musicals going to the venue. In any case, we should expect to see something with a very broad appeal, whether that's a family show, whether that's a very well-known thing, whether it's big starry names. That's the kind of show you're going to need to sell a massive venue like Theatre Royal Drury Lane. But I think that is everything that I have to say about the closing of Frozen. Fingers crossed no other shows close in between me finishing filming this and trying to upload it literally this evening to YouTube. Hopefully we're through the worst of the January closing announcements, and from here on out we're going to see a lot of theatrical prosperity. Fingers crossed. Back to the main video that I've been trying to end now for about 20 minutes. So make sure you're subscribed to my channel for more theatre news and updates when they come. In the meantime, I hope you have enjoyed today's video. Comment all of your thoughts down below about these show closures. I'm intrigued to hear what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!